Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the McLean County Community Behavioral Health Forum. We are happy to have you with us this afternoon. My name is Kevin McCall, and I am a behavioral health specialist with the McLean County government. And I will be standing in today for the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council Supervisor, Tricia Malott, who could not be with us today. I'd like to start, as I always do, to talk for a second about the forum itself. The McLean County Community Behavioral Health Forum is typically a one-day event consisting of multiple breakout sessions. With the ongoing global pandemic, we have adapted our in-person format and are pleased to offer a wide variety of individual sessions related to behavioral health that will be offered through April of 2021. Please check out our website for a full listing of these sessions, which include topics such as COVID-19, restorative practices, coping strategies, and much, much more. All registration is free, and you can even register the same day. Sessions are held at varying times to allow for maximum participation by community members, but all presentations are uploaded to the McLean County Behavioral Health YouTube page afterwards so that they can be viewed at any time. I'll provide links for both our website and our YouTube page in the chat located on your sidebar, and I would encourage you to check back there regularly for new additions as we continue to add speakers for topics outlined by our planning committee. We hope you will continue to join us through the next couple of months here. Even with a new look this year, the idea of free community education and sharing of ideas originated out of the Mental Health Action Plan, which was adopted by the 2015 McLean County Board. This plan originated out of more than 100 community members that identified needs and best practices related to behavioral health specific to McLean County. In these uncertain and difficult times, we believe that it is more important than ever to help provide education, resources, encouragement, or even simply recognition of life's challenges. During today's presentation, there will be a time at the end for questions. We ask that if you choose to ask a question during the presentation, that you provide enough context so that question could be repeated at the end for Curtis to answer in full. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Curtis Frazier. Curtis is a U.S. Army Special Operations veteran. He was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. After an honorable discharge in 2010, Curtis attended Illinois State University pursuing a bachelor's degree in exercise science. He graduated from Illinois State University in 2013, and he is a firm believer in quality over quantity and commits to those he works with. Curtis currently holds the rank of black belt under Professor Alan Shabaro. And with that, Curtis, you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you for the intro. Like you said, my name is Curtis Frazier, and I'll give a little bit more background to what I and things that I deal with as a result of those actions that happened, and that I feel like a lot of people – 18 years old, like a lot of young guys at that time, we felt it was the right thing to do. You know, things were going on, and we had a part to play, and we signed up for it. With the special operations stuff, you know, there's a selection process that goes into it, and fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of times that selection process leaves young men like myself in a state where they think that they have to be the hardest guy out there. Nothing can penetrate them, and they need to do a job, and they create mental barriers around themselves to do that job, and it's not the healthiest thing. And thankfully, we are learning more about those processes to, you know, help those young guys that are being in those positions now along the way. But like getting back into the military side of things, I did 5 years in special operations. She kind of mentioned I had an honorable discharge, but there's a lot more to that story than was there. I did have an honorable discharge, but I also had the opportunity to be medically discharged at the same time because of some things that happened. So I went on my first deployment when I was roughly 19 years old, and it's kind of what you would expect it to be. It was kind of a highlight reel from what you saw kind of like in movies. You know, I did 5 combat deployments to Iraq between 2005 and 2010, and the first one, I say it wasn't bad. It was easy. I didn't do a lot personally. I was a new guy on a team, so I didn't get to do much, and it was pretty easy. I came back from that deployment, did another training cycle, a bunch of schools. The second deployment was different. You know, second deployment was a lot more interaction, gunfights, different things like that. And at the time, I didn't know that those things would affect me down the road. Like I said, we get in this mind state, especially of guys in that job. And I say guys in that job because at the time on my field, I only worked with males. But this translates to first responders, firefighters, police officers, women in the military as well. I keep saying my guys because at the time I was only with males. But those things leave a mark on you. One thing that we didn't really understand at the time is everything costs, right? And it's something that I struggled with personally years and years after the military, was those things that happen. And as you get older and more mature, the gravity of those things starts to become real. Whether it's being in a gunfight or, taking someone's life in that situation or something like that. Like, as a young man, those things sound very appealing. They're highlighted. They're very romanticized from movies, from video games, things like that. We kind of dull our senses to them, and we forget that the human experience and what we can process sometimes takes time. And so those things kind of catch up to you later in life, especially with me. As I got a little bit more mature, those things started really bothering me. I didn't know it. Fortunately, I've come to a place in my life where I've accepted vulnerability and the ability to say that things bother me. And seeking professional help has made me realize a lot of these tall tale signs that were there before, that I didn't know that I dealt with some things. But the second deployment took a lot. Like I said, everything costs. Sometimes that cost is, unfortunately, soldiers' lives. Sometimes that cost is psychological, that we don't know till a long time later, that you have trouble sleeping. You wake up in hot flashes or night terrors or things that you don't really know how to describe, and that I didn't know how to describe. It wasn't in my field. I did a job, and the psychological parts of it kind of eluded me. Some of it you just kind of expect that, oh, that's just how it is. It's not, and it's okay to say those things kind of bug you. Anyways, the second deployment was the first time that I saw people being engaged in combat. Things happened, whether it was an enemy or a friend, it still affects you on a level. And that was something that I personally never thought about at the time, was, what my subconscious and how my mind's going to process things when they're not when they're against the enemy. And that was a hard thing for me to deal with, to say that those things kind of bothered me, because I guess you could say, like, the culture around special operations, everything, like I said, tough guys do things like that, and they're the enemy. You don't feel bad for them. You're fighting them. But as you grow and you understand these things, they're people. And there's sometimes that still affects you. Yeah, they may have different outlooks on things or whatever it was, but that still affected me on a certain level. And especially when as I got older, started thinking about mortality and the understanding, of life, those things really started affecting me. And I find that I had a hard time accepting myself for what happened, and in a sense forgiving myself for some things that happened, and not letting them be bottled up inside me, because they start eating away. The second deployment, like I said, was a rough one. We had a good friend of mine got hit with an IED. Thankfully, he survived because we had some amazing medics. But things got real. It wasn't a Hollywood type of thing where everyone comes home and we always win. It was more of the human experience and not this romanticized thing anymore. And after that deployment, looking back on it now, I see tall tale signs of PTSD and things that affected me on a different level. I started drinking more. I would drink back home to decompress. is a pretty common thing. Is guys go out from the military, they want to decompress, they have some drinks. You know, alcohol can have positive effects on us and very negative effects. You know, we look at, you know, not just the things that happen physiologically to us. You know, I used alcohol as a numbing agent. A lot of people do. You know, and those things affected and built up over time. Those things affected relationships. You know, thankfully, I've gotten to the point where I could have addressed those things and, you know, get help from people who understand those. And I talking, you know, well, did I have failed relationships? Every relationship I had in the military was failed. Well, part of that was part of alcohol. Part of it was me not knowing how to understand and process the things that had happened. Some of that was just learning how to talk about it. Those things carried on throughout that second rotation, my third rotation, and my fourth rotation. They just kept escalating. You know, and then after my fifth rotation, I had a parachute accident. I got back from the military. I was towards the end of my enlistment, very torn about coming in, getting out. Do I want to stay? I don't know. Well, I had to do a jump to keep my jump status since we'd come back from deployment. I hadn't jumped from airplane for a while. No big deal. And during this time, I had a parachute accident with a guy. He, make a long story short, pulled a slip into me, collapsed my chute. We were spiraling down, and thankfully I was able to do some of the recovery stuff they taught us and able to get away from it. His chute opened. When his chute opened, I was caught up at the top of his risers. So he was down here, I was up, and it acted like a slingshot and catapulted me into the ground. Shattered my right leg, caused some serious damage to my left. Thankfully, I didn't break my back. I didn't die. The other guy walked away from it, but I didn't. I was messed up for a while. I was non-weight bearing on my right leg for 6 months. I couldn't get out of the military at that time either. And some things that happened to me during that was a very hard process to deal with, because at that point in my life, I only knew being in the military. That was my identity. And it was stripped from me, right? It was taken. And I went through bouts of depression. I went through a lot of alcohol, a lot of behavior that I'm not proud of. And it was on top of all these other things that I was dealing with. And I was too proud to say that, you know, things bothered me. And I was fortunate to have some friends that could understand and see that things weren't right with me. But they're young guys too, and they don't know how to deal with that. You know, they didn't know how to approach that with me. So I tried to find other outlets on how to feel like I needed to give me some type of struggle in my life that I felt was taken from me. And during this time, I found Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I found a type of struggle that gave me a sense of mental relief. You know, I started training Jiu Jitsu with other guys that were in the military, and it became a form of therapy for me. I can't really describe why it did. It was a struggle, a fight, I guess you could say, with people who are there to help you. And on an emotional level, I needed that really bad. I felt less than I was because of things that were taken away from me from the accident. And I felt less than I was because of things that I'd done before, you know, things that happened in combat. It took things from me and it hurt. And so I had a hard time dealing with a lot of that stuff when I got out of the military, because it wasn't by choice and I didn't get to choose to leave. And then some things happened on top of that. My platoon and my team, that next rotation after I leave, got hit, and we had a friend die. You know, and that was the first deployment that I wasn't there with him. It wasn't my first friend that was killed, but it was the first guy from my platoon that was. I've had other friends before that were killed in combat, and those things took something from me too. But now I had not just those things, I also had a sense of survivor's guilt. Like I was hurt, I couldn't be there, I wanted to be there, and I physically couldn't be, and I held that against me too. And so I'm dealing with a lot of these things at the same time. And jiu-jitsu became an outlet for me. Trying to process that and feel some type of normality again. It really helped me out going through that. And there was some of it too was like an unspoken kind of understanding between us, like the guys I would train with. They knew something was bothering me and I was battling something. And I'm very fortunate for those people that helped me come up with that. They let me beat them up a little bit. And I don't want to say to feel good about myself, but it did, like, it helped me. Like, that struggle and that fight of felt like I was overcoming something, and it felt like I was overcoming my own demons. And I needed that. I was a struggling young man at the time, and it just tore me away from everything else I had. It kind of separated me from my grief. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became a huge part of my healing process, because it takes an extreme amount of vulnerability to roll Jiu-Jitsu with someone and have them beat you up in a position where they could, essentially kill you. That's the point of something. If they choke you and you could pass out, it's like, man, I trust this person to let go of a choke or let go of an arm bar or another submission if I, tap and say, hey, you win. And it taught me a level of vulnerability I wasn't used to. On top of that, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I got beat up a lot by a lot of people who are smaller than me, and some girls kicked my ass a lot, and that was good for me. It takes a lot of humility for that, and that was something I was lacking in my life, that I wouldn't learn till years later, that those things added up so much to my mental health. Being vulnerable enough to admit that was the first step. Being vulnerable enough to admit that things bothered me was something else that it took me a long time to do. I've been with my wife now we've been together for almost 10 years, and it was only the last few years that I always had the courage or even the strength to tell her that things bothered me. A lot of times I kept that for myself because of ego. And I hate saying that, but it's honest. Like, I was way too proud to admit that I had a hard time sleeping or something woke me up and I didn't want to go back to bed. Especially to my wife, because it's my wife. I don't want her to look at me like I'm less than she viewed me before, that I was broken or whatever. And I say those things out loud, and it sounds so stupid because it's my wife. She loves me, she loves me unconditionally, but I didn't love myself unconditionally, and that affected us in those levels. And learning to be vulnerable with myself and be able to say those things was a big part of my own healing process. Anyways, with the deployments after the military, I went to college. I graduated college. I was still dealing with a lot of my own PTSD stuff and understanding it and learning and recognizing the signs of those things. But like most guys, or I want to say guys, most people in my position, they don't know how to deal with it, so they want to go back to it. Right? So after I graduated school, I had the opportunity to go do some other government work as a military contractor, and I did. I went to that for 5 more years. During this time, I was still learning and processing that, my own, what had gone on with me and what I was struggling with. But it was very easy for me to move back into that same type of lifestyle because it's familiar, right? It's comfortable. Like, it doesn't take anything to really go back to something that's easy. And we say easy in relative term because is it easy to do that job? For some people, yeah. For other people, no. It's physical, it's whatever. It was easy mentally for me because I was back in a routine of doing things, and I was back in a foreign atmosphere where I didn't have to confront my own inability not to sleep. I had to worry about what we were doing on target that night, or I didn't have to worry about sleeping because RPGs were hitting the base. It seemed a lot easier at the time. And it's because I was just looking for an easy way out. because I didn't want to deal with my own demons or even talk to anyone about the things that had bugged me. And so I contracted for 5 years, and during that time, I got an Ambien prescription because it was super simple. It's like, hey, I'd leave back and forth different time zones. I need to help sleep. I took Ambien and drank a lot to numb myself. Like I had issues sleeping and I didn't want to address them and why. And I just chalked it up as, oh, I'm just traveling through time zones all left and right and I just can't sleep. No, it was a lot more than that. And I had a hard time processing a lot of these things because I just didn't talk about them. Like I had this hard time accepting my own vulnerability with myself. And then unfortunately, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I found that through the best way I learned how to express my own vulnerability was with Jiu Jitsu. And so once I kind of started realizing these things and what was going on, thankfully my wife did too. We decided it was time for me to stop contracting. It was, my mental health and what I did and went through, and not just me, but her as well. Me being out of the country, 6 months at a minimum out of the year in some foreign place, not knowing what I was doing was very strenuous too. And we decided better for both of our mental health that if we started to move on. And fortunately, I was in a position to where I wanted to open a training facility to help people. And it became a real big passion of mine was to try to use fitness and jujitsu to help other people like I found it helped me when I first got out of the military, kind of giving me something to struggle, to fight for, and that I had to earn. To be really blunt, like it was not given to me freely. Like, you can't go to the gym and, get strong without putting in work. You can't go to do jujitsu and get good without getting beat up. And I like the fact of having to earn something. And I found it very gratifying to do that. And I found the mental part of it, of the stress relief and the vulnerability that came with it, I wanted to share. So me and my wife pulled the trigger and opened a gym. At the gym, I teach jujitsu. And one of the things that we did when we wanted to open the gym was figure out how to give back and help first responders, military veterans, especially that are struggling with PTSD, that they don't even know it. And so as we looked more into these things, there's an organization called Defy. It's a veterans organization that sponsors military men and women who suffer from PTSD or some other type of military injury to train jujitsu for free. And I learned about the organization while I was contracting. I thought it was great. So when we opened the gym, I was like, man, I need to be part of that. We need to give back in any way that we can to these people, I say, but like to brothers and sisters, like people around us that are struggling that we want to help. I have friends that we talk to. Is like I finally told them I was dealing with things like, dude, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah, and I don't want that to happen with other people in my life. I didn't want other people around me to be going through things and not have some type of outlet. So we contacted WeDefy and became an affiliate for them. And the gym itself, we use jujitsu. We have a number of people that have come through here training. It's like, hey man, I don't care if you pay. I want you to come in and get something from this because that check you write a month doesn't really mean anything to me. It's not why I opened the jujitsu part of it and the side of these things. It's not why I did that. I did it to help people and to share something that I felt probably saved my life with other people. And so now we're a WeDefy affiliate and we give out free training to military and first responders and people who are struggling with PTSD because I found great benefit in that. And some of the conditions that we have with that is, I'll just call them a sponsored athlete for the gym. If it's something like that, we have a conversation beforehand, and part of their essentially sponsorship to train here for free is talks. Like, hey man, we're gonna talk. Like, there's nothing else with it. It's just me and you. Because I tell them my story so that I'm vulnerable with them first, because one, that helps me heal. That's a big part of my own healing process, is being okay with the things that happened. Um, and if they're willing, they can talk to me. It's not a, hey, if you don't talk to me, you can't train here. It's, hey, man, I'm going to talk to you. And if you feel comfortable enough at some point, tell me what happened with you and tell me your story. We can talk together. If they don't feel that way, it's okay, because I didn't feel that way for years, and it's something that we have to understand and be accepting of, that sometimes we're not ready to talk about things. I've told my wife a number of things that have happened, and there's things that I'm still not ready to tell her, whether it's my own insecurities about how she would view me or not. Like, that's a fact, and I can't deny that. And I can't sit here and tell someone else that, hey, if you're not ready to talk to it, you can't do this. It's like, man, these things take time, and we're humans. We're people. We're vulnerable. We're vulnerable on a number of levels. We're not impenetrable, and like a lot of these things that we go through in a split moment leave marks. I talked to some people and I kind of relate it, like, hey man, like, you can drive your car at max RPMs for a few seconds, that's okay. Like, accelerating, what happens is when we sit there and we leave that, we're not changing gears, we're riding at 9,000 RPMs all the time, it beats us up. And that's how I viewed a lot of what happened was, I'm dealing with a lot of these things and processing them, multiple things all the time, and I'm never shifting gears. I'm just driving at a high RPM. Jiu Jitsu became a way for me to shift gears. And that helped me become vulnerable enough to where I was comfortable talking with people about things. And I think that's a very important lesson for, I say males in specifically to learn, because we have a lot of ego and we don't like being vulnerable. We like to mask our insecurities with masculinity, and unfortunately, that doesn't work. We're seeing the consequences of that still, where we all heard numbers, 22 vets a day commit suicide. And they're seeing a really big shift in this piece too, where like, okay, well, now we're not seeing just the vets commit suicide, these guys that are retiring. Well, who are the guys retiring committing suicide and no symptoms of it? They're guys and girls that were in during that same time frame as me, that stayed in, that showed no signs of PTSD, running at that 9,000 RPMs for 8 years. They get out of the military and commit suicide within 2 weeks. Like, man, it's a horrible process and cycle that we have going on that I'm trying my little bit to break. I no means think that I'm going to change everything, but if I can change something for one person, that's a step in the right direction. I always tell people that, like, one person can change someone's life drastically by one interaction. And I hope that jujitsu interaction, or maybe just this, someone, whether they get the strength and the acceptance that, hey man, I can talk to someone about it, by all means, that me sitting here being really uncomfortable and not wanting to talk about things that I went through was worth it. It's helping me heal. I told my wife, and I was asked to do this a little while back. I was like, yeah, sure. Told her 3 days ago, I was like, I don't want to do it. I really do not want to talk to anyone that I don't know about things that I went through, because it requires a very high degree of vulnerability. And vulnerability is such a key thing for us to grow and learn and heal. That I didn't want to do it, but I told her I wanted to do it because I didn't want to do it. If that makes sense. And it's worth being uncomfortable if someone else benefits from it that doesn't, take their own life, or that they seek help and that they find help. That person helps someone else. Like, you can change everything. And then why wouldn't we want to do that? If I can, anyone that ever watches this, whether it's on YouTube or it's live or anything like that, like, man, if you guys want to talk, like, I'm here. I'm not a I'll just listen. If you don't want to say anything, you want to hear my story, and by all means, I'll tell you. Um, I may just stumble around some words for a little bit and not like it too much, but it's a part of my own healing process and growth. And I think that that's very overlooked, uh, just in our society in general, with firefighters too. Like we work with some cops and other people that come through here that are in a, I guess we call a tactical job, whether it's an EMT or something like that. Like they deal with stuff. We have one of the police officers that works, with kids. I'm like, man, I don't know how you could do that. The things that you see, like that would scar me. Like you need to talk. Like those things are very important that we need to get through. And some of them aren't ready to say something yet. Some people have, and that's my whole goal today was, if anything, to shed a little hope and know that you guys, it's okay to be vulnerable, because that's the biggest part of healing. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's about all I got for my talk.
Oh, that was terrific, Curtis. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Stuff like that is really powerful, especially someone here who lives in the community and works with a lot of people. It's nice to have someone that's willing to share their story like that. At this point, for our viewers today, I'm going to give about maybe 1 minute here to ask any questions you might have in the chat for Curtis. If you think of anything later, or for those of you that are watching on YouTube right now, just know that you can also leave questions with us using our contact information, and we'll reach out to Curtis for you and get some answers for you. I actually have a question for you, Curtis, myself.
Yeah.
And do you go by Curtis, by the way? I keep calling you that. I know
Yes.
You don't go by Curtis. Okay, I just want to
make
sure.
Curtis is fine.
Okay. So one of the hardest parts, I think, and I've probably only known one person who I think was given a diagnosis of PTSD that was in my life, is approaching those people and asking them if they need help sometimes when they feel more closed off. And I'm wondering, as someone who's lived through this experience, if you could think of, and I'm sure there's multiple points in your story that you could picture yourself, but maybe think of when you were your lowest or most isolated. Is there any advice you would give to whether it's family members or coworkers or significant others, and how to approach someone that you think is suffering in that way to be more, I don't know, approachable, I guess, or just to handle it correctly? What would you suggest? Is there any advice you would give?
I think personally the best way to make them feel comfortable enough to share is you share something that makes you vulnerable first. And that's a hard thing, and because they may not be ready to share yet, but that was something that was for me. It was like, hey, and it just so happened that a buddy, texted me and he was like, hey man, I went and saw the VA. And it's like, hey, like, I'm glad, like, are you okay? Like, how are you doing? And that's what he told me. He was like, VA. And that was enough for me to tell someone else. I wasn't comfortable telling him yet, because like I didn't, whatever ego reason I had, but it was him saying that, hey, just so you guys know, man, like I've dealt with some stuff. I'm going to the VA, but I just need you, like, I just wanted you to know, like, I have these mood swings and this is why sometimes our friendship's affected because of it. It's nothing for you. I'm just dealing with some stuff. I'm trying to learn how to figure it out. That vulnerability of him first gave me kind of like I don't would say the guts or strength to do it, but it was like, all right, man, like there's somebody who I respected a lot too. It was like, man, this dude's he's very good at his job. He's a good operator. Like, man, that meant a lot that he was, strong enough and secure enough to say that to me. I was like, why do I like that? Like, what makes me have an issue? I think that for me personally, it was having someone show vulnerability first. Now, whether that's, my wife telling me something or like that, I think that's a very big step in it. I hope that answers your question.
Sorry, I had my mic up there. Yes, it absolutely does answer my question. I'm trying to read. It looks like
Perfect.
We got one question here. I'm trying to get it out of the frame here real quick. Oh, it looks like someone is adding a comment. Michelle Hansen Hoback said, PTSD is so complex, involved issues and emotions. It's hard to open up to reach people. Ask for a simpler issue to open up, or ask for a story. Once you get vets talking, they're hard to stop. That's what she says is her recommendation. So would you concur with that?
Yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And this is just me. Like, I hate when people ask me what happened at war. Like, it's not your place to ask. When I'm ready to tell you, I'll tell you.
Right.
I know people that do work, and I know some people that they talk a lot, and that's a very good coping mechanism for them. It's a way they heal. I just happen to not be one of them, because I'm not there yet. But I think that's a very good thing that yeah, that's like to talk, especially if it's something they're proud of or anything like that. And sometimes it's a good gateway to get them to talk about things that are uncomfortable.
Absolutely. That looks like it's it for our questions. So again, to our viewers here, if you do have more questions that you think of, please reach out to us, whether that's through YouTube or you're watching it here live today. Feel free to reach out to us and we'll get those questions answered for you. I want to thank Curtis again for being with us today, and for all of you that are in attendance this evening. I hope to see you at our next presentation, and enjoy the slightly warmer weather out there that we're having. Everyone, take care.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.